It's hard to feel myself with you miles away. I've been wondering why you cannot stay. Till the sky's blue when they're always gray. Trying to sweep myself, but I can't find a way. Where did you go? It's hard to feel myself with you miles away. I've been wondering why you cannot stay. Till my sky's blue when they're always gray. Trying to see myself, but I can't find a way. It's hard to feel myself with you miles away. I've been wondering why you cannot stay. Till my sky's blue when they're always gray. Trying to see myself, but I can't find a way. Where did you go? sisters. Well, it might be that time. Oh, wait. Hold on. Jen, you're talking, but there we go. It might be that time.
Oh, was I muted?
That was me, though. Sandra Betty in the chat. Yes, it is Friday.
It's Friday.
Friday.
Yay.
Well, it's about that time, so let's go ahead and get this started.
Distance nerding.
Hey, get the party going. Let's go. Yeah. How do I give off the same amount of energy that I do without screaming?
I like right now. I'm doing the internal like volcanic energy. That's what I'm trying to give off right now. Is it working? Is it?
So.
Oh, okay.
You're giving off very, very good witch energy right now.
Thank you. Should I put the witch hat on? Do you think?
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, new time, same show. Just
same
another
bat
episode.
Channel.
Same bat channel, same bat time. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday. It is your second helping of the build for the week. And are we doing something different, right? I mean,
what a beautiful morning.
Oh, hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Yep. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are here. We are on a new day, and we've got an illustrious guest as always. But before we get into all of that, of course, ladies and gentlemen, we got to talk about what continues everything going on. We're babysitting my mom's dog, so you can hear them barking in the background.
For babysitting. That's awesome.
Babysitting, that's right.
We're not allowed because our dogs are assholes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this show is brought to you by the good folks over at the wonderful deliciousness that is Dubby. Shout out to Dubby. That's right. Dubby is a brand of energy drinks created to help focus, concentration, reaction time with no jitters or crash. Dubby contains no maltodextrin, no sugars, no fillers, no artificial colors or dyes. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, why? Why should I do Dubby over all the other stuff that's out there? I'm going to tell you why. Dubby contains Neurofactor. Neurofactor is a neurotropic derived from the coffee fruit. Neurofactor helps give your brain
focus, and clarity, while the 150 milligrams of caffeine and 3 essential B vitamins help you stay alert and energized. Find out more about W at www.w.gg. Use the code NERDING10. Get 10% off your order. Yes, Aaron Watson, on a Friday, we opened up a second slot. We're doing Thursdays and Fridays for the future. Oh, fur baby, hold on. You can't. No.
I love the fur babies.
Yeah, there was an ad on the screen, so you can see it.
What a cute little baby! I love that baby.
That's little Callie. And of course, like Jack is here.
Hi.
Hi, Jack.
Hello.
Oh my gosh.
And then,
I'm not gonna pick up my dogs and put them on screen because.
Yeah, and then the troublemaker's down over here too. So Zoe just ran in the room. So, she's a troublemaker. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that all being said, let's get right into this. Our guest for this week is the co-writer, co-creator of The Shepherd, and has so much behind him. Now he has a couple of books on that series right there, but this is, I believe, our first PhD on the show.
Yeah, I mean, between us, do we even have like one of those, a P and H or a D? I mean, your name does start with a P.
Yeah, there's a P in my name. That's about it.
That's as close as we get.
Right. Yeah, there's a P and an H in my name, but that's about it. Now, other than comic books, he's also written 4 books, 2 scholarly monographs, illustrated novels with Tyler J. Walpole. He's done games. He's done multiple comics. And when I say game, I mean he did a role-playing game, which is awesome.
Yes. I'm interested about all of this.
Right. He's got 3 audio courses. He's a professor. And then on top of that, he's also done television. He did a documentary for the BBC.
Yeah, BBC Discovery, that Peter Jesus is Fisherman.
Right.
That's awesome.
The
like,
amount
guy, I feel like we're not doing him enough justice.
Oh no, we're not. Anyway,
we're not. No.
Now he's also a editor, publisher, and project editor for 3 different comic book companies. But the one that we're talking about in particular is actually a company that we're familiar with, Scout Comics today, because we have had guests on the past that have been on Scout. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, without any more delay, please welcome to the show, Andrea, Lorenzo, Molinari.
And of course, I got to get this out of the way. What's up, Doc?
Yeah. Okay.
She had to do it. That was it.
I had to. Sorry.
No, it's all right. We'll go there.
Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Andrea. We're going to go with Andrea from here.
Andrea, yeah.
Andrea. So we will go on with Andrea from here on out. As much as I want to just say Dr. Molinari, because that's not something we're normally do here.
Because he's a respectful young man.
I try to be, but not always. Okay, so we're going to get right into this. Before we get into your story, let's learn a little bit about you. So we have a segment on the show called Growing Up Geeky. What did you geek out on when you were a kid?
Well, comics for one thing. I mean, yeah, that's from the time I was a little kid. I love those things. I remember my dad taking me to the pharmacy, and back then, this is in the 70s, early 70s and mid 70s. They had the spinner racks. I'm sure you've heard this story from others before as well. And at that time, it was like a quarter for a comic book or something like 20 cents, something like that. And my dad would give me a couple quarters, and I'd have to decide. There's all these books, and the little kid, how hard it is as a little kid to try to decide what you're gonna, when you can't have them all, you can only pick a couple of them. So I remember that very distinctly, and doing the calculus in my head, like I gravitated towards the books that had multiple heroes in them, because you get to see more superheroes in the story.
Right,
so
yeah.
Justice League, the Avengers. I also, probably one of my favorite books back then was Brave and Bold.
Oh, yes.
And,
it was awesome.
I love Batman, and many times he'd team up, of course he'd team up with somebody in a Brave and Bold. And many times it was Green Arrow, which I absolutely loved. And then the Brave and Bold would also have a short backstory with usually a totally different character or team up. And for a little kid, that was a lot of superheroes in a short comic book. So
That's
You know?
awesome.
Yeah.
Love the DC love. Phil and I both huge DC fans. So
Oh yeah, and then I read Marvel too. You know, I mean, I was joking with somebody the other day. I remember riding the school bus, and a bunch of us kids having these dog-eared and had no concept of taking care of the books or anything, just reading the absolute hell out of them. You roll them up, put them in your back pocket, and you'd bring your stack of books, and some of them had covers, some of them didn't. Because back then you're taking covers that you really like and you're taking them off and pinning them up on the wall.
Yeah.
Right.
So you could enjoy them more. And then you'd have the book that you could share, and we'd pass them around on the school bus. And so you might read it's a 3-part Iron Man story, and you read part 2 and never another part in the rest of your life,
Yeah. You're like, I never really found out what happened.
I have no idea. You just have to take that chapter, that part of it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
A lot in the 70s, of course, Spider-Man. Of course, we all love Spider-Man, and luckily it was usually the villain of the week. So it was like a one and done, like that one off. You're fighting this week is the Rhino, and next month it's going to be Electro. Whatever.
Yeah.
But that's how my exposure to comics at that point was. Getting them passed around in the school bus or buying them on the spinner rack at the pharmacy. But
That's
that was
awesome.
Love that stuff. And of course, as a kid, you're watching, Saturday morning cartoons in the 70s. This is before Cartoon Network. You wanted cartoons. They ladled them out very sparingly. I'll tell you, back then, it was like you have your comics, cartoons. You're going to be able to watch them on Saturday morning. If you miss them, you might get 1 or 2 after school, and then that's it. You're going to just have to starve to death after that.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Spoiled now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. We're spoiled now. I mean, you can,
Oh, yeah.
I think about like my kid, I have one kid and he can watch it anytime because you stream and you can, you can record it, right? You can record back then. If you weren't up at 7:00 in the morning, you didn't get to see your cartoon. Like,
right,
I mean, so.
Right. So that was a big deal, getting up early on Saturday morning. You get your bowl of cereal and sit in front of the television and make sure that you have the ones that you have to watch. You change channels to make sure, because this one that you like is on this channel, and this, you have to turn the channel after that. And, so that was a big thing. It was really exciting because, of course, they come out with the new cartoons every fall. So it was always going to be what will be the new cartoons, that new cartoon series that they would do. And then, of course, you have your old favorites like the Super Friends and the Flintstones, Scooby-Doo. That was the stuff, like,
and the Jetsons. I liked the Jetsons and
all that stuff.
I like Top Cat. I was a big fan of Jabberjaw.
Oh yeah, sure.
Hong Kong Phooey, like those.
Oh man, Hong Kong Phooey.
Yes.
Hong Kong Phooey. Let me tell you.
Man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you go on.
Great ape.
Alienate most of the chat. They're like, we have no idea what that is. And good stuff though. It was fun.
Good amount of our chat is going to be familiar with all that stuff.
It's true.
That's good. Of course, I love the Flintstones. Like, who didn't love the Flintstones?
Right.
I mean, you have to love those guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Flintstones was so seminal. I mean, because it was a different type of cartoon that a lot of people didn't realize. Like, oh wait, it's not just a cartoon about hijinks. It was actually like family dynamics and how people, and based on the Honeymooners. So it was like really cool. Like,
Well, like the cartoon itself was basically an actual like TV show. Like if you look at sitcoms of the time, it was just in an animated form, but it was exactly what a lot of sitcoms were at that time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good insight. It's kind of like Simpsons before the Simpsons.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Because the Simpsons couldn't be doing what it's doing now for as long as it's doing now if there weren't the Flintstones. But yeah, absolutely.
Correct. Now I gotta ask, just because we're kind of already moving into this territory, but given that you were a Saturday morning cartoon eating your cereal, what was your cereal of choice?
Ooh, that's a good question. I loved, it's funny that it's this time of year, of course, but back in the 70s, like what was really popular was Count Chocula, Blueberry, Frankenberry. So they had the cereals that were, I think you can still get them.
Yep. Walmart sells all of them.
Do they? Okay. I didn't know that.
There was a time
I try
when
to eat
you
a little healthier now.
Yeah, well, there was a time when
It's really not good for you, bro.
No.
Count Chocula was the only one you could get for a while, and they like seriously had like people like were complaining that they couldn't get their Blueberry or their Frankenberry.
We love that stuff, and of course back then, you know, they had the toy in the, so whoever opened the bottle or the box of cereal first was likely the one who's going to get that toy on the bottom. So that was a big factor. Like if my mom would go grocery shopping on Friday, and then so Saturday, you know, an unopened box of cereal, and if I get up before my sisters, guess who's getting the toy?
Right, exactly. I was an only child, so I didn't really have the fear of not getting the toy.
I had 3 sisters, so you had to be on your toes, you know. So
well, yeah. See, I understand. I had cousins, so I kind of get it, but you know, yeah.
Right.
So
but, other cereals that I like too, Cocoa Puffs, Trix, which are kind of the same thing, only different flavored versions.
exactly.
So yeah, but those are the ones that come to mind from the being a little kid. So
Fruit Loops, those are good.
oh yeah, sure,
Fruit Loops, yeah.
Apple Jacks too. I think.
Oh man, Apple Jacks. Apple Jacks, I felt like Apple Jacks because they were cinnamon. I felt like I was being like really like grown up when I ate the Apple Jacks versus the Fruit Loops.
There's so much sugar.
Oh
dear
man,
God, there's so much sugar in those cereals.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's no wonder why so many of us have diabetes now.
Oh my God.
Right. So, or are trying very hard not to have diabetes now.
Really work on that not to.
So I'm gonna ask, because I know that you're also like your PhD that you got, you're a theologian.
Sure.
And you it was what, early Christianity?
Yeah, early Christian history and literature.
Okay.
I did a lot of study in the Greco-Roman world. So think the time of Alexander the Great. So that's 350 CE to the time of Constantine. That's 330, roughly 330.
Oh wow.
Wow,
I should say BCE. Excuse me, for Alexander, and then CE for Constantine.
That is amazing.
About 700-year span, and I did a lot of work in the Mediterranean basin in general, the different cultures, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Carthaginians, and then also in this, you know, things, the people like the Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. So I was very interested in all that stuff.
And so, like, how did you, like, did you just wake up one morning and say, you know what, I really think I want to study religion?
Well, I loved myth. I loved the stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like, that's really what attracted me. Like, I was never somebody who was big into doctrine. You know, I liked the storytelling component of it. And so that would include biblical literature as well. But also, you know, like the stories, like one of my favorite stories is the Sumerian Babylonian epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest epic literature in the Western world. And one of the things that had, I bring that up in particular because one of the things that it had that very much attracts me about the mythology was I'm very interested in myths that talk about the afterlife, right? Journeys in the afterlife. So the Egyptian mythology was fascinating to me. You know, of course, the Greeks and the Romans, you know, all the heroes, I always joke that if you're a Greek hero and you didn't go into the afterlife, well, you really weren't.
What were you doing with your life?
You know, had you had done anything really at all.
Yeah.
I just love those kinds of stories, you know, stories like Persephone, for example, the idea that she's kidnapped by Hades, and when she's there in Hades, you know, there's this winter and nothing is growing on the earth, and then when that is negotiated that she gets time to come back to her mother, that's the springtime, and you know, those kinds of things. But
that is actually one of my favorites too. I love the Persephone story with Demeter and how she's the reason that you don't have crops in the winter is because Demeter is so depressed that she doesn't have her daughter. And I mean, it's great. And like it's so like there's subtle differences in where you hear the myth from, the different, like she was kidnapped. No, she decided to go. Like there are certain things that depending on who tells the story,
Sure.
And so, yeah, I love that. I'm a huge Greek myth person. So
I mean, I love Greek mythology, and I mean, part of it was because in the 90s they had TV shows that are on it, and then of course the Hercules cartoon from Disney, which that made me dive into Hercules and realizing Hercules is nothing like the Disney cartoon.
No.
But I was even more enthralled with it when I started learning about the trials and kind of like why he has the trials and everything like that. Like it just he's so much more compelling of a character than the movie makes him out to be.
Yeah. And the fact that Hera actually hates him.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Unlike the cartoon, she actually hates him and actively works against him at every turn, Oh, yeah. And there's good reason. I mean, he's the living embodiment of her husband's infidelities. So, of course, she's not going to be really fond of.
Oh, yeah.
Hercules.
I mean, half the myths are because Zeus can't keep it in his pants.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's almost every major demigod and anyone that has, except for one that comes to mind, but like most major heroes are children of Zeus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To a point, even in fake myths, Wonder Woman is a daughter of Zeus.
Yeah, when they retconned her, they said that because
and that's not a bad idea. I mean, in terms of weaving her into the Greek mythology like that, that's not a bad idea at all.
She is my favorite hero ever. So of course,
she appeals to me as well for those same mythological aspects that pop up repeatedly in her stories. I mean, and it's just there. It's low hanging fruit. Why not do it? It's good stuff too.
Yeah, done well. I feel like it was done well. And it's funny because when we were talking about having you on and we started reading some stuff, I was like, he's like the guy that created Wonder Woman, because he's like this, he's got this academic career, and then he's also makes comics. And granted, you don't have as much bondage as Wonder Woman did in the beginning, but
no.
Right. So there's that.
I don't want to disappoint the chat, but I'll just say that right now. The shepherd doesn't go into that direction. So
right.
There's, I don't want to get any expectations up. So.
It goes in a different direction, though. That is just a
slightly different direction.
Yes, exactly.
But it is just as satisfying. At least to me, it was just as satisfying.
Oh, thank you. Well, like I said, the mythology, it's really good stuff. I'm a big believer in trying to be faithful to the mythology of whatever culture that you're working with. But also, Jen, you made a really good point, I think, talking about how there's different variations of the same story that exist within the regions. Like, for example, Nordic mythology, which I'm not as strong as I am in the Greek and Roman or Egyptian.
I was seriously going to bring that up. I was going to say...
I love Nordic mythology, but if you read it, you'll find very quickly that Loki, or Lukia, he is portrayed in really kind of a variety of different ways, really from just kind of this mischievous prankster to someone that's a lot darker and more kind of almost like we would call like a demonic type figure, and and everything in between.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Where he can't help himself, but he just has to meddle and just has to do it. It's just it's really interesting. And I think what that reflects is the different communities that had a different take on him, and their stories kind of exist to this day alongside of other communities that were also telling stories about essentially the same character, but they viewed him differently,
Yeah, and a lot of myths, especially because when I was just being weird and loving Greek mythology, learned that
weird about liking Greek mythology.
No,
well, I got really into how
you're
there
in friendly ground, I would say.
There's horse girls. I was the Greek myth girl. So I had learned that, because the way Greek culture was, that it was so tribal that each each different, like the different tribes had different gods, and those gods came together, and they're the one, like it created the Olympians. But when the Romans took over and like different cultures that they took over, they absorbed a lot of that, but they changed certain things. So a lot of their gods were combined with other gods. And so it changed certain things about it. So you could read like a myth that was from like that Greek tribe, and the Romans would change it just slightly. And then you got something different. It was just amazing to me how little differences can really change the lesson of the myth itself, because I feel like that's what a lot of our like culture is based on even today, is we learn lessons from the stories that are told.
Absolutely.
So.
And that's absolutely right on the money. Keep in mind that these stories are told orally, and when a story is told orally, it lends itself to an adaptation to its audience. And I used to tell my students that in a lot of ways, these stories, like history in particular, is very, very flexible in the ancient world, their understanding of it. And in a lot of ways, I say history in the ancient world, history telling is basically old men talking to young men and giving them examples of what to do and what not to do.
Right.
And you could apply stories of the home and hearth are stories of old women talking to young women, giving them examples of what to do and what not to do. So they have a moral quality to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of flexibility, and that makes people really queasy. Like modern people, they understand history in a very different way than the ancients, particularly Romans.
Definitely.
Telling.
Right. Yeah.
The amount of times that I bring up like kind of like the history of Christianity, where like a lot of people don't realize that Christianity started out the way that we look at how who am I thinking? Jehovah's Witnesses are right now. They would go door to door and say, "Have you heard the word?" And then eventually the Gospels were combined and taken. I mean, that's what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. So it's just kind of like that's it's interesting to see how many people know how Christianity started, kind of like how it became what it is now.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's oral tradition, and eventually gets written down decades after the fact.
Right.
And then there's flexibility in the storytelling even there. I mean, you can compare the four Gospels and see how they tell the same story. And there's a lot of points of contact, but there's also, different emphases and themes too, based on the storyteller. So that's very common, and it's just, once you accept that flexibility, it helps you understand, that they're telling stories to teach moral conduct or what to avoid,
or what to what
well.
to avoid. Definitely, I think Oedipus is probably one
Mm-hmm.
one of those. But so do you feel that the comic book characters now, do you feel like they're the equivalent of that?
Oh, sure, absolutely. People question this always about this idea of me transitioning from the scholarship to comics. It's actually a stunningly easy transition. And a lot of it has to do with the specialty for me in the myth and stuff. You're dealing with folklore. You're dealing with, it's, how to put it this way, is think of it as stories that are told for entertainment, but also for inspiration and education too. Like what we've been talking about, this idea that you would, learn a lesson from it. But it's also an entertaining lesson. Like these aren't boring stories. If they were boring, we wouldn't have passed them on. Wouldn't still be talking about them. Right. But they're exciting stories, but they do have like educational value to them, inspirational value. Even the idea of like, the stories of the heroes that, face all these obstacles and difficulties and trials and tribulations. Somebody like Odysseus, in the Odyssey, in Homer's The Odyssey. There's a moral lesson there too, as well as the entertainment value, in the sense of this, that a good Greek doesn't give up, doesn't quit when it's, when the going gets hard, and it will get hard in this life. So expect it, and just, have to put your head down sometimes and lean into the storm.
I'm reading the Wheel of Time series right now by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I say that because I'm in book 13. I've been really reading this, and it's very similar to that, where like there's a lot of like religious context to it. I've noticed like there was one book, and I was like, "Hey, aren't these the four horsemen of the apocalypse?"
Yeah.
And my husband went, "I think you're right." But it's just interesting, like the hero's journey itself. I mean, you could say that Odysseus was probably like he did like an epic hero's journey,
Mhm.
and they threw everything at him,
Right.
except a kitchen sink because they didn't have one at that point. But I mean that I love that. I love that aspect, and I've always thought that our modern day comic books are very similar to that. Around a campfire, you're telling these folklore tales. They're just our modern folklore. This is what we aspire to be. So
Right.
I love that.
It's funny because when I was in high school, my high school English teacher, when she taught the hero's journey, she was like, "Okay, so here's Odysseus, and let me show you why Star Wars is a part of that legacy," and compared the Odyssey to Star Wars to get like all of our attention, and it worked.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways it's kind of like a naturally occurring thing too, because the hero's journey, most of the time it starts out with the young character, right? It's a coming of age story, that we all have to face, and all going to be, trying to find our place in the world and facing opposition and feeling like we get to the point where we're alone and we can't go any further. And then we somehow get the help that we need, to be able to take one more step and to be able to experience some sense of success and, accomplishment, that type of thing.
Awesome. Well, so now that we've talked everybody's ear off about all that, so who influenced you as a writer? Like, who would you say are your influences?
Okay, so my all-time favorite piece of literature, and I have a lot of different literature that I enjoy. My favorite is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
That's
and
a good one.
If you know that, you'll understand what I'm doing with the shepherd, because I love ghost stories, and I love redemption stories. I love stories where you have somebody who is you watch them transform and become better than they were, and maybe shown that they need to transform, and that's one of the things I love about the Christmas Carol, is that sense of taking on Scrooge and Ebenezer Scrooge and seeing this incredible transformation, but also understanding him as not just this two-dimensional character, that he was a bad guy and then he became a good guy, but there were good elements of him, and he experienced these things in his life that caused him to protect himself, to try to protect himself and come in on himself, close himself off from feeling other people. And once that was kind of like thrown in his face and he was challenged, he was forced to see himself as this young man, this child, and remember the weakness, remember the pain, and to learn to have compassion on himself.
Right.
And then once he could start to have compassion on himself, he was able to start to apply that compassion to others. Tiny Tim, for example, to care if he's going to be there for the future, if there will be more Christmases that we'll see his like, that type of thing. I find that really powerful, to see that real transformation, and seeing that, we don't get to where we are in our life without a backstory. The backstory is everything. It tells you, how you got there. But then you're also faced with, like I said, that challenge of, is that where you're going to be? Is that where you want to be? Is that the end for you? Are you going to end up in this grave alone and unmourned? Or do you want something better for yourself? And I feel that that's a really amazing kind of storytelling. That's the kind of thing I want to do. But there's lots of other, I could spend a half an hour talking about literature that I love. But yes, that's my favorite.
So I know that you also like Shakespeare, and because I read the first volume. I read the first volume. I had planned on reading the rest of them, but I was so impacted by the first volume of The Shepherd that I was like, I need a minute.
I
So
was able to get through the first, the fourth, and I got about halfway through the second. And
Wow.
the second resonated a lot with me.
Wow.
And I'm definitely gonna finish it. But I mean, like, oh man, I'm a
Well,
vet.
you got the digital copies. You know, I hope you'll enjoy them. And you know, that means a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a veteran. So I mean, like, you know, like when you have a story the way it is, and just kind of as visceral as it is halfway through the second story, with the subject matter that it is, it's and kind of like, again, the explanation as you're going through, because I'm enthralled at this point. I'm like, why are they where they are? Again, I don't want to give spoilers away. I want people to buy the book. You know, I'm like, why are they where they are? And it's like, at first, it's like, this is almost a non sequitur until they start explaining it to Lawrence. I was going to say the shepherd, but to Lawrence. And they're starting to tell him like why they're there and everything like that. And it's like, oh my God, this makes so much sense.
yeah,
You know, that
I really did like, but I liked it. But this has nothing. This has to do with it, but doesn't have anything to do with it because of Shakespeare. Okay, we did get off on, but I do want to ask the question. All right.
Okay.
So, what's your favorite Shakespearean word?
Oh, that's no problem. Hamlet, and then right behind it, Macbeth.
But word, the actual word, like a word he created. Do you have a favorite?
Oh, a favorite word. You know, I've never thought of that before.
He's created so many words too.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I'd have to really give that some thought. But the plays, like I thought that's where you're going with, is what's your favorite plays, and Hamlet and Macbeth. But I'd have to think about that. That's a great question.
Oh, thank you. No, I love Hamlet. Actually, Much Ado About Nothing is probably my favorite.
Okay,
Not Much Ado. I'm sorry, Midsummer Night's Dream because
Midsummer
of the
Night's Dream,
fantastical.
Midsummer Night's Dream is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
It is my all-time favorite. I love it. I love the whole, and it's got Greek. It's Greek, so it's, you know, I was like, oh, it's Greek, but I just loved the way that the fantastical way he told that story. I love Hamlet though as well. Ophelia, I feel like, is a very underrated character. She, you know, is very strong, and a lot of people, when they perform the play, don't give her the amount of strength that she should have. But anyway, so my favorite word, I'll tell you this: I like recompense, but I also like reconnoiter. That he actually created that word, and a lot of people don't know that one.
Yeah,
so,
I didn't
but
know
yeah,
that either. That's good.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So now let's talk about you. Let's talk about your character here.
All right.
So how, like, what's the best experience that you've had in this journey with the shepherd?
Oh, I think working with my son. My oldest son, Roberto, is my co-writer. Like you notice on the screen, it says co-creator. Yeah. So Roberto, my son, he's 30 years old. He'll be 31 actually in a couple of weeks. And we do this together, work on the books together. The volume 4, The Tether, is actually, he's the lead writer on that. And I worked in a secondary capacity on that volume. But that's, you know, really kind of hammering this out, kind of doing it together. That's been very powerful. And then my daughter actually worked with me. She does work with us. She helped write one of the stories in volume 3, but also helped edit The Tether. So it's become kind of a family thing as we're going forward with it.
Was that pretty organic, or like?
Yeah,
I mean,
and let me just kind of back this up, especially for the chat, you know, because you probably already saw this in reading the volume. So the shepherd, the origin of the idea of the shepherd, and the shepherd is a guide of souls in the afterlife. Let's say that, okay? But he doesn't start that way. He starts out as just an ordinary dad and professor. And this whole thing was actually a nightmare. The whole story was based on a nightmare that I had about my own family, and particularly my own son, Roberto, who's now my co-writer. And in my dream, I dreamed that I lost him to a drug overdose. And we've always been very close. He's my firstborn. My wife had him when we were halfway through my doctorate program. So he was there in the really, you know, like when she told me that she was pregnant, I was horrified, not because I didn't want a child. I very much did want children, but I was so poor. We were so poor. You know, we laugh about it today.
Yeah.
But it wasn't very funny, you know, because we were both working. I mean, they tell you in a doctorate program, and for good reason, by the way, do not work. You know, they gave me a scholarship, but just to pay the bills, had to work 20 hours a week. And I'm trying to go full-time to school. My wife's working full-time. She's doing 2 jobs. And still the refrigerator is like, you know, an echo chamber. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to afford diapers, you know? But we ended up being really, really close. And you know, he was with us in that time of, you know, poverty and just trying to make it. And so when I dreamed that, you know, that he had died, and it was such a horrific dream because it wasn't just that he died. I got news that he died, but I had to identify his body in the morgue. I saw him in the funeral parlor. I was at the grave site. And then months afterwards, I'm trying to cope with this grief that feels like I'm drowning, you know? And I remember waking up from that nightmare, and I'm sweating and I'm shaking, and my wife is next to me and she's like, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't think you want to know." And she's like, "Well, now I kind of do." And I told her, and she's like, "I hate you. Why would you, why would you tell me this?" You know? And I'm like, "Because you asked, you know." And it took me couple days really before I was able to work up enough nerve to talk to my son, who was a teenager at that time, because it was so detailed. I'm thinking to myself, is this some kind of a portent? Is this some kind of prophetic thing that I'd never had anything like this before. So I literally had no idea what to do with it.
Right.
But when I told him about it, his whole reaction was very flippant, which is Roberto to a T. It was like, "Oh, Dad, that's really cool." And I'm like, no, it's really actually not very cool at all. It's really quite the opposite of cool. And but this
is my worst fear, and it was in a dream.
It was terrible. It was really terrible. And his whole attitude was, "Dad, we should do something with this. This is a cool story. We should." And right away he was like, it didn't take him long. He was like, "Dad, we should make a graphic novel. This should be a graphic novel." Because we were, you know, I was taking him to the comic book stores as a teen and playing, you know, games, card games and hero clicks and all that stuff at the comic book store, and doing that on Saturday evenings or Friday evenings. And so he was very familiar with all that. And so it was really him that kind of pushed us to end up making the series. So that's kind of the origin story of the origin story.
Hey, that's great. I mean, that's amazing things. And you said, like, in some of the stuff, I did read a couple of things, articles that interviews you've done, and you had said that you don't really remember a lot of your dreams, but that one you did remember. So have you had any other dreams since then? Okay.
Not at all. And nor do I wish for that one.
No, yeah.
I'm like, no, that first one was really good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're like, I'm good.
I'm good now, you know.
You also talk about it in the forward and everything like that too. And I mean, you see a lot of the influence in that story, in the story, and it translates to something just gutturally visceral. It's so utterly relatable. Jen texted me and she was like, "Dude, I just finished the first book and it made me cry."
I was crying. Now, granted, I have some trauma triggers, so I think that's probably it. But I lost my dad, and he and I were very close. And I have a 21-year-old son, and he was premature, and so I had a lot of anxiety, and I still to this day have a lot of fear about losing him. So
I think being a parent you just step into the world of fear. Because now you've got something that really matters to lose. Or when you love somebody, whenever you love somebody, whoever that is, I think you understand fear because you understand what you could lose.
Yeah.
I think you don't know, like people talk about how you don't really know what love is until you have a child. I think you don't know what fear is until you have a child, because you have to take care of that little bundle of goo.
And they work. I think they work overtime to try to find ways to get themselves hurt.
Yes.
I mean, my wife and I laugh about this because there was a period in their life where my daughter is like 4 years younger than my son, and good kid, really good kid, but she had a penchant for getting injured, just in the dumbest possible ways. Like she was bouncing on the bed one time. Now, of course, being really crappy parents, we used to tell our kids, oh yeah, jump on the bed all the time. We're down with that. Of course, we told them not to do it, but if, you know, whatever you tell them, that they're going to do exactly the opposite of that. So she ends up, the bed is close to the wall. So she ends up falling between the bed and the wall. So my son, Roberto, you know, he's probably 9 at the time or something like that. So she's like 5. He reaches down to be helpful and yanks her arm and dislocates her elbow.
Oh no.
Okay, I didn't even know you could do that. Now I found out, well, apparently you can. And there was a stretch of like 3 months where she had like 3 different injuries. We were on a first name basis with the physician's assistant in the local emergency room. And the last one is she actually fell down the stairs, which if you know anything about social work, that's like, you know, the stand, well, they fell down the stairs, you know, it's to cover abuse. You know, you're like, you're not going to believe this, dude. She actually fell down the stairs, you know? So it was crazy stuff, but that's being a parent, you know? So that's, you know, you're touching into that with that book is really, you know, that fear and that the horror of losing a child, you know?
Yeah, to me, that is much more of a horror story than any creature you could create.
Yeah.
Like that to me is the most horrific. And so I really loved that. It really resonated with me. And I found myself, you know, just thinking like the same as Lawrence, like if something like that happened, like would I go to that extreme? And I feel like I could go to that extreme of I need to find out if they're if they're at peace. And the way that it ends and the twist in that first volume, I loved it. It was chef's kiss. So the writing was amazing. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. And also like, I mean, it's just everybody needs to read it. So everyone needs to give him money so that he can finish this.
Well, we're printing the books. That's really what we're doing a Kickstarter, and that's really what the Kickstarter is all about, is raising money to print volume 4. So, you know, my wife does very well, and she's incredibly supportive. And so she said, you know, the money you make is with comics and editing and stuff like that, just, you know, pour it back into the Shepherd. And I've been able to do that with her support and just encouragement. It means everything to have that. And she's like, you know, it's given so much to the family. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it really has brought us together. We go to conventions, you know. My son's favorite place to go for conventions is New Orleans. And you can figure out why. The food, the music. Oh my God, it's so good. Yeah,
it's a whole vibe. I mean, it's a vibe. And a con in New Orleans, that's its own sort of vibe.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful that I don't live in New Orleans, though, because I would be a defensive tackle. It's just not good. You know? Because I don't think I think they have like some kind of civic rule that you can't have a bad restaurant in New Orleans.
Oh,
they would be drummed out of the court or something like that, you know.
I did actually have bad food in New Orleans once.
Wow.
Well, we went.
You should have called the authorities and had them arrested immediately.
No, a friend of mine wanted to go to a Mexican food place, like a Spanish food thing, and I'm like, why would we? So, and we went, and I had the worst like chicken mole I've ever had in my entire life. So, but I felt like, you know what? I think I had the most like the least touristy New Orleans experience, because this place had books stacked up. It was this like, you know, I feel like maybe they just converted their living room into like the thing, and it was just somebody cooking in the back. But yeah, I really So don't have Spanish food in New Orleans. That's the key on that one. But anywho, so all right. So the Shepherd is your project, but you've done other like other projects, and you edit and you basically do everything. I don't know how you act out the time for us to come and talk about all of this because you're so busy.
Well, I've done a lot, but it's been over, you know, I've been around for a while too. So, I mean, I've had time, but
okay.
I've done a lot of editing. I'm the editorial director for Scout Comics, and I've had a little over 180 different properties that I've worked on. So not 180 comics, but 180 series. So
Okay.
it's a lot. And
Yeah,
I've
that is a
enjoyed
lot.
it thoroughly. I really have. And before that, I've edited for Caliber Comics, and then Amigo Comics, which is a Spanish publisher. I did work with them as an editor on their staff. And I just thoroughly enjoy it. I would describe editing as kind of like, remember when you were a little child and you got to go over to a friend's house and play in their backyard with their toys?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what it's like. As a writer, you have your toys that you play with. And when you're an editor, you get to play with somebody else's toys and help them kind of tell their stories. And the trick, of course, is to be helpful and not trying to drive the bus. You're not trying to be a backseat driver, but you're just trying to be another set of eyes and just say, okay, I'm a reader, somebody who cares about you and your story. Here's what I'm seeing. Is that what you want me to see? Here's how this reads to me, how this character comes across. Is that okay? Is that what you're looking for? And you're able to mirror that back to them. And then that give and take, that helps them understand how the story is landing. Because one thing you learn as a writer is what you have in here, it's trying to get it from here onto the paper, and that's always the challenge, I think. So to have an editor, somebody who's invested in you, and I really feel like I'm really well prepared to be an editor, because as a professor, I spent 12 and a half years teaching at the university level, Creighton University in Omaha, and then Barry University in Miami Shores. And most of that was at the graduates level. So I really got a chance to work with writers and researchers and really, work with them on their projects.
Right.
So I like that you say that, because it sounds like you're saying like you're the second voice, like you're the, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Is this
Right.
this is the vibe you're putting out? Is that what you want to put out? And
Right.
and I love that aspect of it, because I had never thought about editors being that. Because when I think of editors, I'm like, okay, you look through and you look and you say, oh, did you mean to put this sentence together like that? Maybe I'm just a weirdo that way too. But
Things that the editor does, of course, and there's different layers, like process of working with bringing a book to publication. But one of the things I believe strongly is that, when it comes to grammar, like if I was working with you, I'd tell you, when it comes to grammar, I want you to follow me. Okay. Listen to what I'm telling you, because I really work hard to try to get the grammar right. But when it comes to the creative stuff, I'm going to tell you what I see. I'm going to make suggestions. I'm going to tell you, here's what you're doing. Here's what I think you should do. And here's why. So it's not just making a suggestion, but it's giving reasons why you think that suggestion's the thing you should do, which is really important. Like as a parent, you sure know this. It's very easy to say, I want you to do this because I'm your dad or I'm your mom,
yeah.
But I think what's important is for them to understand that you really have good intent for them. And I don't want you to play in the street, not because I don't want you to have a good time, but there are people that drive fast in this neighborhood. And if you play in the street, there's a chance you could get hit by a car. So what I want is for you and your friends to play over here in this yard where it's safe.
Right.
And don't go chasing balls going into the street for these reasons, and being able to lay that out for them. And I feel like if you can't explain why you think they should do this, maybe you shouldn't suggest it, And then, of course, the freedom is that, being the editor, you're making the suggestions, but the writer is free to accept or not.
Yeah.
And once they realize that they have the freedom to take the advice or not to take the advice, or to listen to the advice and say, okay, I'm not going to do that, but your advice gave me an idea, and I'm going to riff off that and do this. That's fine too, because part of my job as an editor is to identify what I think are possible problems in the story. Like, here's what I think it seems that there's a hole here. Like you're making this, I'm sure you've read this before, where the writer makes a jump and you're like, whoa, how did we get from this to that?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand how we got there, And so it's like sometimes a short scene that you add this scene or a little narrative narration in there, different things you can do that can help make that a smoother transition for the reader, so it doesn't feel, like they slammed on the gas and you're getting whiplash back into your seat.
Right. Like the Memorex said.
Yeah, just making them aware of what you're seeing as you read their story and the experience, the reader experience of reading the story.
That's awesome.
Because we actually have a friend of the show, Mitchell Martinez, who got published through Scout, The Wannabes.
Did he tell you who his editor was?
I don't remember.
I was gonna say, I'm betting it was Andrea.
Yeah, I actually chatted with him today. He's coming out from California to Chattanooga at the end of October. We're gonna do an Airbnb together and do that show together. We've done other ones. He came out to Tampa, and he was at where were we, in Shreveport? We did a Shreveport show together. So yeah, I know Mitchell pretty well.
Yeah, Mitchell. I remember. So I knew Mitchell back in the day before he published the comic book. He had always talked about how he wanted to publish a book and wanted to get he wanted to do his own comic. He was always this guy we saw at all the comic book stores. And then we started this show around the time that he finally got his book published. So he was one of our early guests.
Cool, very cool. Yeah, small world, right?
It is. It's so funny, and the comic book industry, especially independent comic book industry, is a very small community, and it's nice when you know other people and you can be like, I know that guy, they're cool, So yeah. I love it. Well, that's awesome. I love all this. I feel like we have so many other like questions I want to ask you, but we're almost out of time. Sure. So, and you actually answered a few of them on your own.
Well, one thing I was going to say to Phil, because Phil was mentioning he had started to read the second volume, and for the benefit of the chat, the second volume takes place in the afterlife, and basically the story, boiling it down, is that the father and son, as well as the grandfather, they're kind of traveling in the afterlife together as a family, and they come upon a hospital in the afterlife for the souls of warriors that are suffering from post-traumatic stress in the afterlife.
Right.
These warriors come from different time periods and different cultures. And the story is they kind of learn to interact with these different warriors, and they find out their backstories, and they try to help them move on from their trauma, from what's holding them back. And I want you to know, Phil, is that story actually came out of the work of my wife. My wife works for the VA. She's a specialist in post-traumatic stress therapy, military sexual trauma, and traumatic brain injury. Yeah. Which, if you're not familiar with, I'm sure you are, but the chat might not be. And that's can be caused by explosions, loud explosions, even the tanks, like the M1A1, the explosion of the sonic cannon, IEDs, grenades, things like bazookas, artillery, other kinds of shells coming in, and that type of thing. And she works with that, and she's actually founded it's a foundation called Warrior Mission at Ease, and they do retreats out of Odessa, Florida. They're all paid for, so that it's nothing for the veteran. They'll fly them in, they'll feed them, put them up in the hotel. It's like a 4-day retreat where they do different types of therapy to help them deal with the PTSD and to resolve it. So that's where that all comes from. Is I'm literally hearing about post-traumatic stress therapy every day, literally every day in my home. And I thought to myself, she deals with the service personnel, active and retired, who are dealing with it here. But what if someone didn't get a chance to deal with it?
Or they did back in World War II, they didn't even know what PTSD was.
It's interesting. They had words for it. Like, for example, the Civil War, they called it shell shock. Right. So they knew something happened to people, but they didn't connect the dots to be able to understand it, let alone treat it. I mean, there was no real treatment for it. In fact, my wife came at this subject because she was dealing with the homeless. She was working for a time for the Salvation Army, and her job was working with homeless. And she began to realize that much of the homeless population are veterans.
Right.
And they're basically self-medicating through drugs and alcohol to try to deal with what happened to them in their tours of duty.
Yeah,
which is tragic beyond belief.
Yeah, it really is. It is tragic, but I'm glad that you are highlighting that in the comics, because I feel like a lot of that is, it's very not, I mean, even though we talk more about mental health now than we did 10 years ago, it's still such a new thing for a lot of people. And so it's nice that you're highlighting that in a volume.
It's the last thing that anybody wants to talk about. I find that book kind of unnerves people a little bit, because it's the aftermath that everyone would like to sweep. It's like, thank you for your service. It's over.
This for you.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it's not over for them.
And then I liked it because you dealt with like the family grief, and then you're dealing with a different type of trauma in the second volume. And what I saw of Tether, it looks like that's dealing with Val and some of his stuff, like his regret of not being able to live the rest of his life. And so it's an interesting way and an interesting horror story that is more of a personal horror, and not necessarily a horror that, that we can feel as personal, but it's not really a community thing. But how you translate that, I do love it. I think it is a great thing. I wouldn't have considered it horror, but yeah, when you talk about it being horror, I totally understand, because it is very horrific. These things, it's just very personally horrific. So.
Well, I think the realistic things are more scary to me, because my wife and I go round and round about this, because my wife can't deal with the movie The Shining. She can't deal with it. If I even do this around her, she can't handle it. But I went with her when Silence of the Lambs came out. I went to that movie, and I found that to be hands down the most frightening movie I'd ever seen. And even since. And it was because it was too realistic. It was too close to what you could see. You could actually see this happening. I'm like, that's horrible. That's pretty horrific. I've never really found Freddy Krueger and Jason scary, because it's you can't kill them anyway. It's just and they keep killing all the really dumb people. So it's well, they are doing a community service. I mean, ordering pizza when there's a serial killer out there.
Yeah, that's dumb.
So
I love that. Okay, so we're starting to wrap up.
Sure.
And thank you so much. And definitely, The Shepherd is an amazing book. So I do want everyone to read it. So donate to your Kickstarter, because so you can print it, so you can get it out there. So we're going to go back to learning about some things about you. So these are going to be kind of shorter answer ones,
sure.
I guess.
Sure.
Okay, so
this is the first round is what you're telling me.
Kind of, yeah. So what would be the worst movie sequel ever made? So a movie, well, I guess you could say Silence of the Lambs, but I mean,
Silence of the Lambs has had 2 sequels, so I mean that's
well, kind of. The sequel was really a prequel, and Manhunt. Anyway, but I'm saying something that had a movie that Titanic 2, or I mean, something like that. What would be the worst movie sequel ever made?
I don't know if it's to say. I'd really need time to give you a more in-depth answer than that. But the first one that came to mind of a bad sequel was that Wonder Woman 1984. I just thought it was just not good. Just not good.
I really liked it.
But she took over somebody else's body.
Yeah, that was very cringe. That was
really not cool. It's I don't know what they were thinking. It's true, we'll put him,
They were thinking they wanted Chris Pine back. I think that's what it was.
Do something else. That is not cool, dude. That's not It's just like Wonder Woman the rapist. I'm like, oh, it's not good. It's not a good look.
Oh man, yeah, no, I do get that.
She's stronger than me, so I'd try to be real gentle with her about it. And I'm just like, Diana, I don't know what your culture's like, but let me explain to you here how we view that kind of thing. It's not really very cool, and you probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, that was the most cringy part of that movie. I will say that.
So yeah.
All right. So
the first one was good. I like that one.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
So who would you most like to sit next to on a 10-hour flight, and why?
Oh, Mike Mignola.
Ooh,
Mike Mignola. I probably more than any single person in the comic book industry, I think what he's accomplished is amazing, because he is a rare entity where you have somebody who is an outstanding artist, but also is a fine storyteller as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to get that. You're either really, really good at one or really, really good at the other. It's rare to get both of them in there. And he's done that. But in addition to that, which is already, that would be enough. He's created truly like a universe around his characters, like Hellboy, of course, BPRD, Abe Sapien, but so many other stories that he's told, like Baltimore. Actually, Lord Baltimore is actually my favorite series of Mignola, and I love Hellboy. I love Hellboy, BPRD, Abe Sapien, Lobster Johnson, another spin-off character. There's so many good ones, and it's a big body of work that he's produced over quite a period of time at a very high level. And I'd love to talk shop with him. I'd love to try to talk him into doing a cover for the Shepherd. I'd love to do a team up of the Shepherd and Hellboy. That would be amazing.
That would really be
Mike,
good.
if you're listening, consider yourself asked.
famously, Mike Mignola watches the show, so I mean, he'll be.
There you go. No, he's amazing. Seriously, I at the risk of offending people, I would say, what Stan Lee did was pretty impressive, but I think what Mike Mignola has done is more impressive, because it's also done in an environment where you already had established superpowers in comics, DC and Marvel.
Right.
And you're going to a smaller press that's going to have, by definition, a much smaller megaphone to get your work out there. And then you just keep producing this incredible quality that it cannot be denied.
Absolutely.
I could spend 10 hours with him. He'd probably hate me afterwards. He'd be like, would you please have this man sit over there?
Yeah. Can you please just change his seat?
Leave me alone.
I just want to sleep. Okay, so who would you cast as Lawrence Miller if a series or movie were made of the Shepherd?
When I first started writing the Shepherd, I thought somebody like Christian Bale, who I respect as an actor. I think he's an amazing actor with incredible range. This is a little different because it's a different, somebody of a different color playing it. But I'm trying to think of his name now, but he played Cottonmouth in
Mahershala Ali.
Yes, he is such an incredible actor. I would love to have him play Lawrence. That'd be fine by me.
That would be an amazing pick.
He's
awesome.
So powerful, such a talented actor. I hope that we're lucky enough to see more of his work, because God blessed him with tremendous talent. He's just so powerful.
Right now, we're all keeping our fingers crossed for Blade.
Right. Yeah,
If
he does that, he'll be magnificent.
Yeah,
he'll be magnificent, in my opinion. Yeah.
And then, what are you nerding out on right now?
What am I nerding out on?
Mm-hmm.
I will. I've already told you. I've already brought up Hellboy and Mignola, so I know that they've released The Crooked Man on streaming, and I haven't seen it yet. But I have talked to my daughter, and that is planned for tomorrow night. That we're going to watch that, and I think also there's a documentary about him that I'd like to also watch. So maybe a double feature of Mignola. So that's what I'm nerding out on right now.
You're just all about Mike right now. That's what it is.
Like I said, I just am a big fan of his work, and not creepy. I'm not stalking him in any. Swear to God, Swear to God, not stalking. So,
All right.
That Magnola fanboy life, though, I love it.
yes, I am a fan, but not a stalker. So,
Yeah, I mean, he's an amazing writer. I agree with you on that 100%.
just a great creator. Yeah.
So, Phil is going to ask you probably the most important question that you will ever be asked in your entire life.
Uh-oh.
It's actually the hardest question you're ever going to be asked in your life.
Okay.
I don't know if you're ready for this, man. Are you ready?
I don't know.
All right. What is your favorite kind of taco?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I like chicken in the tacos, to be honest. I to be honest with you, I guess maybe it's fajitas. I like the fajitas better than tacos. I'll eat the tacos. I mean, I'll eat any of the tacos. They're all good. So
You like the fajita chicken taco?
yeah, the vegetables. I love it. I'm a big vegetable guy, and
Mhm.
I love grilled chicken. It's just amazing. That would be my first choice over steak. I know that's.
Would you say with avocado, without avocado?
I'll throw the works on. I'm good with all of it. Yeah.
Little cilantro, little
Yeah. Oh, cilantro. Yeah, it's great.
salsa.
Good.
Now, cilantro doesn't taste like soap to you, right?
No,
Okay, some people actually that cilantro tastes like soap. So I was like,
I don't know. First of all, you have to ask, why are you eating soap to know?
right. Well, they probably had
Just
their
asking
mouth washed
profound.
out when they were kids. So, I don't think they do that anymore, though. All right, so
It's the law now.
it is actually it is. I think the that is also something that child services will be called out on is if you put soap in your child's mouth.
They didn't, when I was growing up, the parents had no qualms about ingesting any soap. So yes,
Yeah.
it was a thing.
Look, when we were kids, it was okay, leave until the sun sets. When
Oh,
the
yeah.
sun sets, come home and you
Yeah.
may or may not get dinner.
Exactly.
So what is some advice that you have for anybody that's trying to get into comic books or wants to get a doctorate in theology? Either
Well,
one.
Yeah. The doctor. Yeah, it's both of them are incredibly hard fields to do. And it's not even about getting the doctorate or creating a book. It's trying to make a living in both those fields because there's too many in both areas. It's very hard to get a job as a professor. Most of your opportunities are going to be adjunct, and most of your work in comics is going to be freelance. So they have way too much in common, but they're both the kind of thing that you do out of passion. So if it's really in your heart, you're going to probably do it anyway. But just kind of, I try to tell any of the writers, like maybe this is the advice you're looking for, is try to find something you can do to pay the bills, and then let the writing be a hobby until it isn't, until it's more. And that way you don't have that desperate pressure to try to make a living as a writer. Kind of allow yourself to grow into potentially a career like that. And maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And it might not be just you're not good enough. You might be plenty good enough, but you also need a little luck. You need to have the cards fall your way a little bit. And, there's more to it than just, working your butt off and, producing something that is good, hopefully.
Okay. All right. So who would win in a fight? Hellboy or the Shepherd?
Ooh, I don't think the Shepherd would fight Hellboy. I often think about the conversation that they would have. And one of the interesting things I think that the Shepherd, like I imagine them having a beer together, and one of the things early on in the Hellboy thing was that, him feeling like he was being pressured to be this like evil lord of hell.
Yeah.
And the Shepherd saying to him, first of all, you determine who you're going to be and what you're going to be. But also, I would propose that what you do defines who you are. And that if you look at what you do, Hellboy, you're constantly saving people. You're constantly helping people. I would propose that you're basically a guardian angel. and that
Oh.
demons weren't created separately. They're just simply angels who rebelled. So
Yes.
why couldn't you be a guardian angel? You know,
There you go.
and I would tell him not to cut his horns because that's the way he's made, and the way he's made is beautiful, and it doesn't have to change. You can be who you are and be beautiful, just that, like that. So
And horns are totally in now. So
they're
yeah,
cool.
don't
Yeah,
Absolutely, they're very cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Chicks dig them.
Yeah, it's
I
like
mean,
scars. Chicks stick scars and horns, right? Yeah.
I don't actually know that, but yeah, why not?
Definitely
No,
something.
but yeah, no, I mean, it would be, I'd love to do something like that, a team up. I mean, it's the trope that heroes battle each other because they mistake each other for, I mean, think about volume 1 of The Shepherd. There is something that happens like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could certainly happen. I think Hellboy would probably give the Shepherd everything he could handle and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would more be like a lively conversation, less of a fight.
Yeah.
I wonder, see, and this is where the thought in my head comes. I wonder if the moment they meet, number one, are they meeting in all of a sudden I'm forgetting the name.
The scene.
The scene.
Are they meeting in the seam, or are they meeting somewhere in between? Because the shepherd isn't going to be kind of like out in the world, but I mean, at the same time, he
Yeah.
can be seen in the regular world. So, like, how does Hellboy interact with him?
Yeah, that would be. I think the shepherd can come into the world. I mean, he does come into the world, certainly in volume 1. He does in volume 3. And ironically, I'm writing a story now where he's doing that. Although Berto, my son, and I have talked extensively that in the perfect world, we'd really like to have the shepherd stay in the seam as much as possible.
Right.
Because there's so much work to be done there, dealing with souls that need resolution. But sometimes the story dictates that he has to come out to deal with somebody. So I think he could certainly meet Hellboy, there on the earth, but also like in the hellscape where he, like in Hellboy, Hellboy in Hell, like they could meet there,
Right.
Because that was one of the things that probably, it's funny because my son and I have read so much Hellboy. I don't know if it's all of it, but certainly we keep up as best we can. And that was the one story arc I was not that pleased with. And a lot of it was because I just don't see Hellboy belonging in hell. Like he's just a good soul. Like he doesn't belong there at all. Like other than just to kick butt and take names. But that's not who he is.
Right. Well, like I was thinking at first, when they first meet, there's got to be a fight scene, mainly because Hellboy's probably going to mistake the shepherd as some type of demonic force.
Sure.
And the shepherd is probably going to mistake him for some type of monster on.
I mean, it could easily go that way. So
then they wind up having a beer.
Absolutely. We certainly, I would say to Mike, is I feel like they need to share a beer. The final scene needs to be over having them have a beer together.
Right. It's just like, it would be such a, like, they, again, halfway through the book, they realize, why are we fighting? Right. But I mean, like, but the thing is like, again, the shepherd and the staff of truth, trying to get the truth out of Hellboy, but then Hellboy, basically unlocking the power of his arm.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, you're going to have some pretty epic fight scenes between the two of them before they realize, hey, we're on the same side. Oh yeah. No, we're on the same side. Okay, cool. Let's go fight demon.
That would be, it would be amazing. I'd be ready to call it a career at that point. I'd be very happy to ride off in the sunset. So.
Right. There you go.
No, I just admire, like I said, I admire the work that he's done. It's just really good quality stuff. It's a legacy. It really is an amazing legacy.
Right.
I hope that we can do that with our book, try to have a legacy that we write stories. When we write stories, we're really trying to write things that are meaningful, that are going to stick with people, stories that are going to haunt you a little bit. and not be forgotten. I jokingly say this, but it's kind of true. Is one of my favorite writers is Dante Alighieri, and they say that when Dante sat down to write the Divine Comedy, that he intended to write a classic. Now that's pretty arrogant when you think about it, but it's also incredibly cool.
Yeah.
Is that you're doing it and you want to write something for all time. And I feel like that's the kind of thing we want to do. Whether we do it or not with The Shepherd is for somebody else to decide. But we want to write meaningful stories that are going to make you think, make you feel. If we made you cry a few times during our stories, then hopefully that's kind of what we're aiming at. Some of the best compliments that I've gotten, like on that volume 2, Phil, is I had a Marine Corps Brigadier General in Awesome Con, Washington, D.C. He had somehow got his hands on that. And of course, one of the characters in there is a Marine who dies in Fallujah, 2004. Mm-hmm. And he had read the book and loved it. And he said, how did you get all the, you did a really good job capturing the Marine Corps lingo and
absolutely
the equipment and stuff like that. And we just did a lot of homework, a lot of research. I mean, we got our hands on, like, just to give you an idea of the detail on this, there's a handbook out there for modern military operations in urban terrain.
Yep.
Moot.
Yep.
And we got a hold of that puppy and read it.
Oh, man.
And it's basically how to conduct house-to-house fighting, Jen.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Like when you're going up the stairs, like the stick of men that are
how to clear a room without shooting everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So each of them is responsible for angles,
sectors of
so
fire,
that they're protected. And of course, Fallujah, that particular battle, it was very relevant because it was the most house-to-house fighting that the Marine Corps had seen since Hue City in Vietnam.
Oh,
wow. And it was ugly fighting, because you might come upon the Mujahideen in a matter of feet. And it's just who pulls the trigger first.
Right.
So it's really brutal, really close in stuff. And of course, that particular battle, if you want to research Fallujah, you can go onto YouTube and watch film of the actual battle. There's tons of it out there. So doing the homework.
He's got it. Yeah.
This is my handbook. Actually, the movie is in this.
Yeah.
Whole different monster right here. This is just tells you a little bit about where I come from. So yeah.
I would be the one. I'm not allowed to handle weapons because I might hurt myself. That's how I am. So,
but it's just the training that I got as a historian is to want to try to get those things right. And what we tried to do in each of those stories in that particular volume was we really wanted to have a historical setting and then set a fictional character in that real historical setting.
Yeah.
And have it feel as real as we could have it feel.
I love stories like that where you put them in a real situation, a historical situation, but you tell that personal story. I feel like that is the best.
It's the best kind of history.
Yeah. It's because it makes it, because you can see yourself in it.
Exactly.
And it kind of gives you a different awareness of you as a person and how to strive to be better. So I love that. I just love it.
That's real. That's the right kind of history. That's why as a historian, like letters home from the troops, like in Civil War. Yeah. I mean, we read a lot of letters. Like I have a book here on the shelf. See where I put it here. But I've got a book here on the shelf that basically it's one of the characters was infantryman in the Confederate Army, the 13th Mississippi Infantry, and he dies in the Battle of Fredericksburg, December 11th, 1862. This is the first part of the battle where they're fighting for the city, and then the battle goes on outside the city. But we learned a lot about that because the soldiers and the Confederate in that unit were writing letters back home, after the fact. So we're hearing, from people who were actually there, and you just can't beat that. Putting the details into the story, you just can't do better than that.
I feel like even if you don't use any of that, like you don't use the actual, like what you read, that
It
I think it
informs.
yeah,
It
it
informs it.
informs.
Yeah.
And it makes it more like it gives depth to it. So I just yeah, it's amazing. And I could talk to you about all this stuff like all night
Exactly.
long.
History nerds, we could talk about this stuff all day.
No, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Oh yeah, we do got to start wrapping here. So
Sure.
last thing I'm going to ask you here. So what's next for you? Do you have any shows coming up? Any appearances? Anything that you have coming up? Of course, you have the Kickstarter, so go ahead and plug that as well.
Right. Is it all right to put the Kickstarter link in the?
Yeah, if you want to send it to me in the private chat, so I can put it in the
You got it.
in the actual chat, so that people can click on it.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. I think yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So it's been a long year. A lot of conventions. Normally for me, my conventions range from like Dallas across the Old South into the Carolinas. I do the Midwest and like Washington, D.C. So that just to give you that kind of, it's a big area, but there are some areas obviously I don't cover. I have 2 shows left this year. The next show I'll be leaving for this week is in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that's this coming, not this weekend tomorrow, but the next weekend after that. And then the final weekend in October, I actually mentioned it with Mitchell. We're going to be in Chattanooga. And Chattanooga is a fun city, is a cool city in Tennessee.
That's a fairly large convention too, the Chattanooga
yeah, it's
one.
good times.
Yeah.
Good times. Yeah, that one's a 2-day. I actually prefer the 2-day conventions because it's like from a sales point of view, if you're selling, like I'm a vendor selling books and stuff. Usually Friday is what we call the window shopping day, where people are looking and they're making mental notes of what they want. But from a sales point of view, you don't usually have your best sales day. So where Saturday, Sunday tend to be your best sales day, and it's more fun because you're selling books, you're keeping busy, time goes by faster. Otherwise, if you're there on the floor 8 hours and you're not doing a lot, it's like, wow, you start questioning your life choices and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But
So
it's also
what's
a fun
coming next.
environment. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's good. Awesome. What else?
I was going to say, so where can everybody follow you? Where can they learn more about you? If they want to follow the progress of the book or want to know more about what's going on, where are some places that people can find you?
Okay, so you can find me the Scout. It's called The Shepherd Comic. And I'll put that in the, I'll give you that in just a second. You can share that with them.
Mm-hmm.
The Shepherd Comic is my website. Barrow and I have that website. And of course, scoutcomics.com. The Shepherd Comic on Instagram is my main social media thing. I also do Facebook. I'm probably not nearly as good on social media as most people. I do my best. It's like I'm the kind of guy that I'm probably gonna step on some toes here, but I don't take pictures of my food. Like I don't want to. I think it's ridiculous. It's like unless it's something really unique. Okay, yeah, then fine. If it's something that, but I'm probably just not the right. Like if I didn't have to for the Shepherd, I probably wouldn't be on social media.
Oh yeah.
So, my friends were all happy when college buddies and fraternity buddies were all happy that I was coming on to Facebook when I started writing the Shepherd, because they got to follow what I was doing a lot easier than trying to call me and stuff like that.
Try to get a hold of you.
So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I feel like we didn't talk about the comic enough, so I'm going to ask you to come back and we can talk about it some more, and bring Berto, Roberto come on, and we'll have you both on. And
he was with me this weekend, because we got slammed by Milton, by the hurricane. Luckily, he is on the West Coast by Tampa, so he evacuated and came to us. And we're in my wife and I are in West Palm Beach, which is on the Atlantic coast. So we saw some really high winds, a lot of rain, and we got a number of tornadoes that dropped in all over the place in the area, although none, on top of us, thank God.
Well,
but we got beat up our state got beat up pretty good. Two hurricanes in 2 weeks. We're like, okay, we're good. You know, we feel like this was a good hurricane season. We'd like to move on now.
Yeah. Okay, we're done now. Hurricane season can be over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know about tornadoes. I'm in Oklahoma, so
yeah.
I'm in California, so you know it gets
he
hot.
gets the fires and the earthquakes.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
if only we could move the hurricanes to when the fire season is in California.
Wow.
And
yeah.
the fire
Seriously.
season.
That's what we need is to send all that rain. Yeah.
There we go.
I hate that thought of all those acres of trees being burned up. It's beautiful country too, and people's homes, and yeah, it's just terrible. So,
yeah.
Apparently, we need to take care of our environment. There's a novel idea.
There
yeah,
you go.
I think we all agree on that.
Or we'll all end up in the seam.
Exactly.
Nice
transition. Very good.
Yeah,
So,
nice.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And
it was our pleasure.
So wonderful talking with you. Totally enjoyed it.
Thank you. Again, we appreciate you coming on the show. What aside from that, so we just got all your pluggables here. Jen, before we get going here, I know you hate doing this.
I am not a pluggable person, but okay, I'll do
need
my
your
best.
plugs.
All right. So I have my own YouTube channel called Frey Girl. And it basically what's on it right now is something called Classified, where we take your favorite fandoms and we classify them into Dungeons and Dragons classes.
Ooh.
We have a sister show called Journals of the Classes. So if you're not well versed in the classes of Dungeons and Dragons, we actually have a show for you. We go through all of the classes and we actually go through all the subclasses. So yeah, I'm kind of the newbie with the subclasses. When I played D&D, they didn't really have a lot of them. If you were a bard, you were just a bard.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I do it with my son Shadu, who is usually on the download with us. But yeah, that's me. I'm on the download. Usually I do occasionally come on the build like today. And I do also something called The New Order on Kyber Cave, which should be out soon. We are actually coming back for ADR and doing a little looping. But it should be out soon. So yeah, definitely check that out. I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty much everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. I am no longer on Twitter. I cut that off. Facebook, Frey Girl or Gotham Oracle. My dog has their own TikTok and Instagram, Gal the Corgi. So if you want to see corgis, you can always go there. She's a little brat and I love her to death. That's me. So.
And of course, ladies and gentlemen, you know who I am, your boy Young Phil. You can connect with us on all the social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. It's not X. Twitch, TikTok, Threads, YouTube, Discord, MySpace, Vine, GeoCities, Friendster, Second Life, AIM, Farmers Only, Christian Mingle, OnlyFans. It's only pictures of Aaron Watson's feet and mandals and the beard and James's glasses just staring at you, judging you for not watching the build.
We might have to put the witch hat on there.
Yeah, well, you know what? The witch hat might be more pictures on the OnlyFans.
Seasonal. It'll be a seasonal OnlyFans.
Seasonal OnlyFans. Of course, if you'd like us to break up with your boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, pet, schoolyard bully, annoying neighbor, or just tell us how much you enjoy us, hate us, or wish the internet would consume us completely and spit us out at the feet of Wonder Woman in 1984.
There you go. Wow.
Very
specific.
Then you can send us an email at hold on, I've got to put it on the screen.
I was gonna say
send us an email at dist. It's because the joke doesn't work if it's not on the screen.
Right. Well, and I love that. I love that the graphics department decided to make us a graphic that actually moves. So if people are slightly tipsy, they think that they're having an episode.
Wait, am I drunk right now? What's going on? Why is it moving like that? AntsNerding@AOL.com. And we will read it live on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, whoa, my face is big. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it from us this week. We will see everybody back on Tuesday for the download, where we'll cover all the news, the rumors, and the reviews. Maybe we'll actually start talking about Agatha all along, like we've been meaning to do for like the last 4 or 5 weeks now. 5 weeks.
Yes, because I have opinions.
Oh yeah, we should probably just bring the breakdown in and just
start doing it.
30 minutes. All right, so that is it, ladies and gentlemen. We are good to go. It's now time for the dance party. Let's get this going. Simba. You're a Lego Simba.
Lego Simba. That's pretty cool, by the way.
Thank you. I finished this build last night.
Wow.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Vampire witch, go! Bye, everybody.
We'll see everybody next week.